Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley, who oversaw the operation, told lawmakers today on the Hill that the two survivors did not, as some defense officials have been claiming for months behind the scenes, radio for backup before a second strike killed them. That's according to two sources with direct knowledge of today's closed-door briefings, during which a select group of senators and Congress members were shown classified video of the strikes. Democratic Congressman Jim Himes, who saw the footage, called it, quote, one of the most troubling things I've seen. A short time later, he elaborated on that with CNN's Jake Tapper.
The video was enormously disturbing, and I can't describe it in detail, but to tell you that the initial strike, as you might imagine, when a piece of munitions falls on a small boat, did an immense amount of damage, caused a huge amount of fire, and ultimately the end result was two individuals without any weaponry, without any tools of any kind, clinging to a wrecked boat, really what looked like flotsam. And we observed them for a long time, and the commanders involved said that they believed that there might be some chance they would be rescued, that there might be some chance that the cocaine on board could be recovered. But these two individuals, to anyone looking at this thing, would say are moments away from slipping under the waves. The decision was taken to kill them, and that is in fact what happened. And that was pretty hard to watch, I must say.
Well, not everyone who saw the video shares that view. Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton, for one.
The first strike, the second strike, and the third and the fourth strike on September 2nd were entirely lawful and needful, and they were exactly what we'd expect our military commanders to do. I saw two survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs down for the United States, back over, so they could stay in. Millions of Americans have died from drugs being run to America by these cartels.
Again, Admiral Bradley said that, at least when it came to radioing for help or backup, the survivors did not do that. According to our sources, said they did not appear to have radio or other communications devices. Now, you'll remember defense officials have been quietly pushing back on criticism that this was a war crime by arguing in part that they were legitimate targets because they appeared to be radioing for help or backup. Now, today, Admiral Bradley said the two survivors were in no position to make a distress call. Now, if true, it marks yet another shift in a story that has changed considerably since it first broke in the Washington Post earlier this week.
If there were a second strike that killed wounded people wounded in the first strike, are you
number one, I don't know that happened. And Pete said he did not want them. He didn't even know what people were talking about. So we'll look into it. But no, I wouldn't have wanted that. Not a second strike. The first strike was very lethal. It was fine. And if there were two people around, but Pete said that didn't happen.
Does that make you?
I have great confidence.
He's saying there's no second strike.
I don't know. I'm going to find out about it. But Pete said he did not order the death of those two men.
Now, quoting from the initial Washington Post story, quote, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave a spoken directive, according to two people with direct knowledge of the operation. The order was to kill everybody, one of them said, which Secretary Hegseth denies, and which the president, as you heard there, said neither he nor Hegseth knew anything about. The next day, the story changed somewhat, with the White House, along with Secretary Hegseth, putting the focus squarely on Admiral Bradley.
On September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated.
To clarify, Admiral Bradley was the one who gave that order for a second strike.
And he was well within his authority to do so.
Now, that same admiral seems to have given lawmakers and now us another window into what actually happened. I want to bring in Congressman Jake Auchincloss. Congressman, what is this new information that Admiral Bradley reportedly says that the survivors of the initial strike did not appear to have radio or other communications devices and were in no position to make a call, a distress call? Does it change the government's argument that the secondary strike was legal and justified? Does it, in your opinion, should it?
Anderson, good evening. Doesn't change my interpretation of the events. It makes them more horrific, but I've long stated these are illegal. I commanded a joint training mission to Central America to do drug interdiction operations. I work with Panamanians, I work with Colombians, I commanded reconnaissance, Marines, and naval officers. I know what drug interdiction looks like. It's riverine training, it's jungle training. It is not killing shipwrecked sailors. This is not an operation that falls under the law of armed conflict. This is an operation that falls under law enforcement maneuvers, and neither the first nor the second strike, in my interpretation, are legal, and they are not going to keep Americans safe from drug inflow.
I talked to Senator Tammy Duckworth a short time ago, and one of the things she was saying is that, look, this is not, in her opinion, this is not about necessarily these two men and narco traffickers, but what if in the future, if the U.S. is doing this, an American pilot is shot down, is floating in a dinghy and able to radio for help, would some force kill him and say, well, look, the U.S. is doing this, we can do this too? Would it change somehow the rules of war if this is not illegal?
I certainly agree with the senator that the United States respecting international standards and humanity is critical, both for who we are as a country, but also for how we want our citizens to be treated. I would also agree with her that as horrific as these details about these two shipwrecked sailors are, it's not actually the central point. The central point here in these operations in Central America is that this is blood for oil version 2.0. Just like 20 years ago in Iraq, when another Republican president got this country into military adventurism in pursuit of oil, Donald Trump is trying to get the United States involved in military operations in Venezuela because they have the world's largest oil reserves, and Chevron has a joint operating agreement for those reserves, and the president is trying to hook up the U.S. oil majors.
According to a source with direct knowledge of the briefing, Admiral Bradley ordered the second strike to destroy the remains of the vessel, killing the survivors on the grounds it appeared that part of the vessel remained afloat because it still contained cocaine. Does that rationale make sense to you?
That they were allowed to under the law of armed conflict, and again, the law of armed conflict does not apply here because this is not an armed conflict. And I know that because I'm a member of Congress and I never voted to go to war with Venezuela. And that's what would make LOAC apply here. But even supposing that LOAC was applying to this situation, you're only allowed to strike a disabled vessel if there's reason to believe that that vessel could be brought back into armed combat against another U.S. vessel. That is so clearly what was not the case here that it just makes that rationale ludicrous. But again, that rationale is 2 and 3 orders removed from the actual central point, which is that we shouldn't be engaged with in military operations against Venezuela in the first place. Americans do not want a blood for oil campaign. This president does not have the authority to wage it, and he certainly doesn't have the justification to wage it as inhumanely as he is.
As we mentioned, President Trump just yesterday said he supports releasing the video of the second strike. Do you actually expect that to happen? Because obviously the administration has been very eager to share, some videos of other strikes.
I don't know, but I will make this prediction, Anderson, which is that Secretary Hegseth is going to try to find a military officer to make the fall guy in this. He's going to try to lay the blame on a service member. He won't try to take the blame himself.
It's interesting you say that because in one of his public statements early on about Admiral Bradley was, everybody should know I have his back, I have the military's back, but it was Bradley who made the order, which is kind of, it's saying you have somebody's back, and yet it's also pointing out that they have a target on their back.
He will find someone with stars on their shoulder to take the blame because Secretary Hegseth ultimately does not have the integrity to own this decision.
Congressman Jake Auchincloss, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. Joining me now is former Congressman and military veteran Adam Kinzinger. Congressman, what do you make of all that we have learned today and this idea, this latest exclusive CNN reporting, that part of the testimony today was that there was not a radio or that they were not radioing for help or radioing for something?
Yeah, Anderson, this collapse is like, I was seeing yesterday or the day before, they were trying to make the case again that they were calling for help and trying to gather the drugs back up. That was actually the argument. The other thing I would say, by the way, is even if they were calling for help, you would think the military would want to stay and observe who comes, right? And then maybe interdict that boat the way we used to interdict boats by shooting the engine out and sending another boat to interdict it. But this is really tough to see any case in which people hanging on to survive doesn't not just violate LOAC, it violates the maritime law. We used to, but you would read stories about pirates back in the day that would be rescued out of the sea because there's an understanding that the second, whether you're military or civilian, the second you're basically floating in distress, it is the requirement to pull them out of the water. And it doesn't matter, Anderson, if you're a bad person or a good person. It doesn't even matter if you're on drugs or whatever. At any point when you are distressed in the water, it becomes incumbent on whoever can to rescue that person. And this is the opposite of what happened.